Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. And just a couple of announcements. Some of you might remember last year, we had a couple of workshops on letting go of the past, which I think is a big part of what everybody's doing with a lot of difficulty in some situations, and particularly when it's somebody close to you or circumstances that you're pretty attached to. They were very well attended, very well received. And so Kailia Roriba, our counselor, our resident fabulous licensed counselor, is going to offer this in an 8-week series on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. It's through teleconference, so you can be anywhere and participate. And so if you want to do that, we have a member, non-member price. You can send me an email at pampopper@msn.com. But I heard rave reviews from this last time, and it's really by demand that we're offering this again. This time not doing it in an all-day Saturday, but breaking it into sessions, which people then get a chance to reflect on what's talked about and then bring it to the discussion the next week. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, this is another Kailia program. One of our new courses this year is Communication and Problem Solving for Better Health. First of all, when people are all stressed out, stress is a negative for health. It makes everything that's already bad worse, and it causes people who are healthy to become unhealthy. So anything that you can do to relieve stress is good. And also there are problem-solving issues associated with making diet and lifestyle changes. Not everybody's on board. Sometimes people try to undermine you. We live in a world that doesn't support great habits. I mean, all kinds of reasons why people have difficulty. That is going to be taught the first weekend in March, and that is going to be done boot camp style. And strongly recommend this program for this course. And you can either buy it by itself, or we have great packages of courses here, by the way. If you buy an annual pass membership to Wellness Forum, you get to pick 6 of our courses, and the per course cost gets really, really low that way. So if you hear a lot of things that you're interested in, let us call us and or send me an email, and we can talk about putting a nice package together for you too. All right. So, it's very important to pay attention to what experts say. And not only that, we have to pick the right experts to listen to, of course. And so the information I'm going to give you comes from an article that was published by the American Institute for Economic Research, and it covers what experts, some of whom you'll recognize, think about lockdowns and restrictions like the type that we've all been experiencing. So I want to emphasize how important it is to listen to experts. So one of the experts we're supposed to listen to is Mr. Fauci. And in early 2020, Mr. Fauci said to reporters when talking about quarantines and shutting down and that sort of thing, he says, quote, "That's something I don't think we could possibly do in the United States. I can't imagine shutting down New York or Los Angeles. Whether it does or does not work is really not open to question, because historically when you shut things down, it doesn't have a major effect." That was Mr. Fauci talking about this. Now, the World Health Organization issued a report in 2019 and stated that quarantine of exposed individuals is categorized as not recommended in any circumstance. The report explains that home quarantine of exposed individuals to reduce transmission is not recommended because there's no obvious rationale for this measure, and there would be considerable difficulties in implementing it. That was what the World Health Organization said in 2019. The World Health Organization in 2006 addressed the issue of social distancing. And the authors summarized in this particular report, reports from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. And they looked at various locations in which isolation and quarantine were instituted. Public meetings were banned. Schools, churches, colleges, theaters, and other public gathering places were closed. And despite additional measures that even included halting traffic and restricting business hours, quote, social distancing measures did not stop or appear to dramatically reduce transmission. So that's another World Health Organization report. Tulane adjunct professor John Barry, who actually is an opponent of the Great Barrington Declaration, in 2009 wrote that quarantines did not work during the Spanish flu. Historical evidence, he says, strongly suggests quarantine is ineffective and instead promotes commonly touted measures such as remaining home when unwell and frequently washing hands and wearing a mask if you're sick. That's this common sense stuff that we used to do when flu season and cold season hit. On the latter point, he says he warns against healthy people wearing masks. He says evidence from the SARS outbreak suggests that most healthcare workers infected themselves while removing protective equipment. Interesting. Seton Hall's Center for Global Health Studies director says travel restrictions did not delay the transmission of SARS. That was in 2009. And acknowledged that travel restrictions and quarantine measures have limited benefit in stopping the spread of disease. These measures ultimately undermine a country's surveillance capacity because people who show symptoms might choose to shun public health authorities for fear of quarantine or stigmatization and squander limited health resources. Johns Hopkins epidemiologists rejected quarantines outright in 2006 in an article titled Disease Mitigation Measures and the Control of Pandemic Influenza. Johns Hopkins epidemiologists note problems with lockdowns. Quote, as experience shows, there's no basis for recommending quarantine either of groups or individuals. The problems in implementing such measures are formidable and secondary effects of absenteeism and community disruption, as well as positive adverse consequences, such as loss of public trust in government and stigmatization of quarantined people and groups are likely to be considerable. They concluded, experience has shown that communities faced with epidemics or other adverse events respond best and with the least anxiety when the normal social functioning of the community is least disrupted. That comes from Johns Hopkins University. Let's see here. Harvard and Yale professors Mark Lipsitch and Ted Cohen said delaying infection can leave the elderly worse off. And what I basically will summarize, because this gets a little bit technical, what they're basically saying is when you try to stop the spread, what happens is you never get any herd immunity. And thus you keep the elderly people locked up. Nobody can get in to see them. But if people who had herd immunity were to spend time with those people, and even healthcare workers, you wouldn't be infecting the elderly at such a high rate. And then this is also interesting. Johns Hopkins scholars say quarantines don't work, but they're pursued for political reasons. And this was in September of 2019. In the report, they explain how quarantine is more political than related to public health. Quote, during an emergency, it should be expected that implementation of some restrictions, such as travel restrictions and quarantine, might be pursued for social or political purposes by political leaders rather than pursued because of public health evidence. Later on, they explain the ineffectiveness of quarantine. Quote, in the context of a high-impact respiratory pathogen, quarantine may be the least likely strategy to be effective in controlling the spread due to high transmissibility. Interestingly enough, in March of 2020, Michael Osterholm, who is now Biden's COVID-19 advisor, also said that it was not a factor, not productive, and changed his mind in a New York Times article in August of 2020 saying he was all for it. And so I could go on, but I'm not going to do that and just summarize it this way. What happened prior to March of 2020 is that a lot of experts at the World Health Organization, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale, government officials acknowledged that this was not a good strategy until they decided that it was. And I think that that's very interesting. And if we had curious journalists, they would ask these people, what caused you to change your mind? And I'm not sure that these people would be able to explain it. So maybe you can explain it. I think you've heard my explanation of it. All right, that's all for now. As usual, pass all of this on to anybody who you think would enjoy learning this from a different perspective, and I'll be back to you tomorrow with more news.